Okay. Tuesday edition of the After Show. You got Wink and Justice with you. Wink over here on the East Coast.
And Justice over here on the West Coast of the contiguous United States of America. It is Red Sky at Morning Tuesdays on the After Show. And that means, well, it could mean one thing or it could mean several things. It could mean that there's a red sky in your morning and it could portend to storms of ruin, and we know that. Or how I like to think of it is that if there's a red sky in your morning, it just means that our hearts are aflutter because, oh my God, it's a Hallmark day. Wink, it's Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Will you be mine?
There you go.
How are you doing?
Not bad. It is 29 degrees out there, your typical February day. So not too bad, and it's not snowing, so that's good too. And also our anniversary today, our 6th anniversary here at netrootsradio.com.
Yes.
So
just as an aside, Tom reminded us that we outlasted Air America.
There you go.
Yep.
So, and hopefully much longer still. But, just a reminder to get in the chat. Just go to netrootsradio.com, scroll down the bottom of the page, and on the right-hand side of the bottom of the page, there is a link to the chat. So click that, join us there.
And that is where we engage folk, not only during the after show, but throughout the day. It is fairly well monitored by the crew.
Yep.
And so,
you can drop
yes,
a question
indeed.
or comment.
Absolutely. And also, if you take a gander over to the leftish of the homepage there, you'll see the chat room. I mean, from the chat room, you'll see the donate, contribute button. And that is a big reason why we have outlasted Air America.
Yes.
Amazing.
Get the bills paid. Yeah.
There's that. And I suppose, since, I remember when I was a kid and I wrote a award-winning story, and then I wrote a bunch of poetry that was recognized. I remember, crowing about it with my dad, and he reminded me. He said, son, even those people who have written the great American novel, they may have gotten some money on that advance, and they were able to buy a house, but they never had enough money left over to put the drapes up. I go, what? It says, yeah, that's why they had to go get a day job so they could put drapes up in their house. Because, so he basically, if you're going to do this, keep a day job. So this is, we got used to it.
Yeah. Yep.
That our activism and our intellectual pursuits always had to be sometimes within the confines of the day job.
Exactly.
I always like to look at it as that, this company is subsidizing the arts, and they don't know it.
There you go, yeah.
Well. Here along the banks of the Rogue River, it is currently 35 degrees. And they say we're going to go up to 63. It did get a little warm yesterday.
Awesome.
We may get up to that number, but going down to mid 30s, low 30s at night.
Yeah.
It's
a long fall from 60.
Well, yeah, that's the making of illness.
Yeah.
It's an illness inducing
big swing, yeah.
Stop doing it. We do have rain forecast here. In fact, the radar images do show quite a band of storms all up and down the West Coast, which does not portend well for the Oroville Dam issue, because they really need to not have water coming into the reservoir so that they have to spill it off, because they need to get that main spillway fixed. And like I said, it's huge.
Right.
So, wow. And, I'll just remind folks once again, the Oroville Dam disaster is the direct result of Republican administrations of Duke, Majan, Wilson, and Schwarzenegger, because when Gray Davis was in, he tried to push through some infrastructure spending, but the Republicans had controlled the California Assembly and Senate for decades. And that was one of the reasons why California, for instance, went from number 1 in education in the United States to about 48. For instance.
How about that? Yeah.
So when your education falls so precipitously, you can imagine what was happening with infrastructure.
Right.
And this is a direct result of that. And when Californians finally were able to wrest control, because, there was some gerrymandering going on, and how did it occur that Republicans were, the control of our government was wrested from the unitary control of the Republicans? Redistricting was reformed, and an independent panel. Now, this was all done by initiative, people power. And they took the drawing up of congressional legislative maps out of the party in power and put it with an independent commission. Ta-da!
How about that?
With a mandate that, it has to, how these maps were intended to be drawn, not long, snaky things that go hundreds of miles along a snaky little corridor, right? Just so you get all the black people in your state to vote in one district, for instance. So you can't do that.
Right.
So just interesting. But as I said yesterday, you don't think that the spillway at the Oroville Dams has an issue. And these torrential monsoon rains that have come, and the bigger rains are still due, Wink, in March and April.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
That's when California counts on those spring rains, right? So we've already had monsoon level rains and a fair amount of snow too. And it filled all the reservoirs. Good. Okay, the drought's over, maybe. But the issue is that these reservoirs have never had this much water coming into them, especially this time of year with more coming in, and now you have this failure.
Right.
And, like I said yesterday, you can pay him now or you'll be paying later.
Exactly. Yep.
That's exactly what's going on. But I love how the right wing still wants to blame. Well, these are liberals. Liberals did this.
Yeah.
Why couldn't they build this thing? Why couldn't they maintain it? I mean, they run government now. Why couldn't they fix it all? Why couldn't they just magically fix it all? It's just idiots. They don't care about governing. All they care about is being flies in the ointment at best. Oh yeah, we have a Russian spy in the White House. He just got fired. Well, he said he resigned.
Yeah.
And I would say we still have a Russian spy in the White House. Sits in the Oval Office, by the way. Has some poopy hair.
Yep.
I mean, look, people keep asking me, well, references, please. I'm all, I can't believe that these people don't know how to Google. I'm not saying that's bad. I mean, knowing what I'm speaking about when I'm subtweeting is important. But, it's no secret that Trump has had a Russian connection since before Gorbachev. Now, come on.
There you go.
So he was compromised, maybe 30 years ago.
Right.
I mean, it's not a secret. People have been talking about it since that time. And now everybody's like, you're so new. Well, it's not just because we're not New Yorkers. I mean, I don't know. But like I said before, in months previous, the only reason Trump got on my radar is because he was the antithesis of everything. The Playboy image, the bullying, the misogyny, the corrupt business practices. Paramount, I think, is one of the issues. And then getting on the what is it, the self-help train, the real estate seminar scam.
Right. Right.
I mean, he did it all. I mean, come on. He wasn't a Paul Hawken. Let's just put it that way. Someone who had a level of balance in his life and believed that a balance of business and arts. And, yeah, sometimes there's disruptions in your family life, even among the balanced. And Paul Hawken wasn't necessarily absent in that. And we all are human, but regardless. Or visited upon Paul Hawken, let's put it that way. I preferred his approach to business and life than a carnival barker like Trump, who just happened to be born into money. Wink, if you and I had inherited that money, just sat on it,
yeah,
man, we'd be having more money than Buffett right now.
Heck yeah, smoking some cigars, yeah.
Well, maybe you. I don't smoke cigars. Don't do that. Yick. Hey, these are the issues we're going to be attending to today, and I better get on it. Now, of course, we are not necessarily absent or bereft in the use of hyperbole here. In fact, we count on it.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
All right. So White House Luca Brasi, department head, Omarosa Manigo warns American Urban Radio's April Ryan that Trump has incriminating dossiers on all the White House press corps.
Yeah.
Nice, huh? Wow. I was going to say, you don't mess around with April Ryan. I mean, she's kind of taking over almost like the Helen Thomas of the press corps.
Cool.
But she can still kick ass if she has to. And apparently this confrontation, I mean, Omarosa was like looming over April Ryan. And April Ryan can be a, Wolverine pit bull if she wants to.
Yep.
Well, my God. Hey, Axis, Sally, Kelly, and Conway. Thanks, Fox News, for blaming the Flynn scandal on the leakers who exposed the Russian calls. Those damn leakers, we would still have our spy in the White House if, he was a direct conduit. I mean, Trump can't talk to Putin all the time. You don't expect that, do you? God, I can't believe these people. And Trump's mass deportation machine would likely face the same fate as his Muslim travel ban did in the federal courts. Because lawsuits just concluded and ongoing before even Trump took office finds ICE's arrests, confinement, and deportation policies to be wholly unconstitutional. Interesting. Hey, for the last half is Tuesday, and that means we get to visit with Kris Reeves, always here affectionately known as Tom Servo 433. And we're going to have a report on cross-checking Kris Kobach on voter fraud claims. He went on TV and he got just obliterated. Oh, my God. DNC races, large and small, and indivisible in Kansas. All that, plus the Connect Unite Act, Daily Co's community calendar, and more. There's always more, and I have to try to figure out how to cap it, right? Especially now, 25 days in, Wink.
Yeah.
Jeez. And more, and all that, plus the Connect Unite Act, Daily Co's community calendar, and more on the after show with that ever so fine fellow over there on the East Coast. His name is Wink, and this guy back over here on the West Coast, and my name is Justice, and we are not just coastal elites. We're general all-purpose elites.
There you go.
Okay. And we do it 5 days a week for an hour-ish in this particular tear in the fabric of space-time because who loves you, baby? Especially today. Yes. Time to be crooning now, huh? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. When I was a little kid, I loved the idea of, the Valentine correspondence, the imprisonment and, the separation and all that and how one dealt with it and the power of the pen. And then it turned into a commercial holiday and I'm just like, yeah, God, I can't stand it almost.
Another Hallmark holiday.
Yeah, it just, it took the innocence of my youth and wrenched it and folded it up and put it in your billfold.
Yeah.
Jesus. God. Well, Omarosa, she did say that every critic of Trump would be made to bow down. And we all laughed and said, he's not getting to be president. Remember that?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
It was like, no, I mean, it was just everybody was getting ready for Hillary to take over. And it was like the sun was going to rise. And then we woke up the next day and not only was North and South, the polls just totally flipped, but we were rotating and orbiting in the opposite direction around the sun. It was like overnight.
Yep.
Unbelievable. And this is by Elizabeth Pressa out of Raw Story. Omarosa Manigault, the former Apprentice star turned White House communications official, threatened American Urban Radio Network's White House correspondent April Ryan, insisting Donald Trump officials have dossiers of incriminating information on her and other journalists in the White House press corps. The encounter occurred just outside the West Wing last Wednesday, near White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer's office. The crux of the argument was over an email Manigault sent to Ryan last October, demanding to know whether the journalist was paid by former Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton's campaign. Because anybody who would report adversely to Trump must be paid by the opposition, because that's the world he lives in, wink. Pointing to a story published by The Intercept, thank you, Glenn Greenwald, thank you, that suggested Ryan was among the reporters Clinton's campaign hoped to influence, Manigault wrote, this story suggests that as a reporter, you are or were a paid Clinton surrogate. Now, of course, the Intercept story didn't actually infer that was being paid. All it said is that these are likely reporters that may be responsive to our message. Like all politicians do. Like Trump did. Except his journalists happen to work for Breitbart, InfoWars, and Newsmax. The most respected in their field of fake news. I pray this is not true, Manigault added. This could be hurtful to your legacy and the integrity of your work, old lady. I added that part, but you know what she meant. In a separate email, Manigault urged Ryan to protect your legacy while she's stalking April Ryan. You have worked too hard to have people question your ethics as a journalist, Manigault wrote. People talking trash about the reporters on that list have no integrity. It's hurtful to hear people say those things about you. Ryan vigorously denied Manigault's charge, insisting the former Apprentice star is trying to harm my integrity and my career. I've been covering the White House for 20 years, Ryan said in an interview. I plan to be here for the next 20 years. You don't mess with someone's livelihood. Ryan said during the altercation, Manigault stood right in my face like she was going to hit me. I said, you better back up, and then added, she thought I would be bullied. I won't be. She also reportedly told Ryan she was among several reporters the administration collected dossiers on. Wow, dirty tricks, dossiers, enemies lists. Where have I heard that before? Of course, Manigault has a history of threatening people, particularly those critical of the Trump administration. Discussing Trump critic Senator Lindsey Graham at Trump's election night party in New York, Manigault told the Independent Journal Review, quote, it's so great our enemies are making themselves clear so that when we get into the White House, we know where they stand. Let me just tell you, Mr. Trump has a long memory, and we're keeping a list, she added. Manigault made similar comments even before Trump's election. In September, she bragged that every critic, every detractor will have to bow down to President Trump. God, I love that when she said that. It's everyone who's ever doubted Donald, whoever disagreed, whoever challenged him, Anna Gold added. It's the ultimate revenge to become the most powerful man in the universe. She said that, not me. I will repeat that. It is the ultimate revenge to become the most powerful man in the universe. There's nothing about noblesse oblige there that I can infer.
No.
Wow. Okay. That's what happens when you let your lessers be your betters, I guess. At least your lessers on the moral scale. All right. This next article is by Brad Reed out of our story. While Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway was getting aggressively questioned by multiple news outlets on the Michael Flynn scandal today, she got a bit of relief when she went on Fox News' morning program, Fox and Friends. Instead of asking Conway to justify Donald Trump's decision to continue employing General Flynn as his national security advisor, despite being warned by the Justice Department that he may have been compromised by Russian spies, the Fox crew instead asked Conway to talk about the disturbing number of leaks from within the government that are seemingly crafted to undermine Flynn. Well, that's a spy novel in and of itself, isn't it, Wink? And who was it in the Justice Department that warned the Trump administration that Flynn was compromised and could be blackmailed by the Russians? Sally Yates. Yes, that Sally Yates. Who was then fired just days later when she said, hey, I think this travel ban's illegal. And you can see Trump in a moment of Shakespearean clarity. Will no one rid me of this damn priest? Ooh. Okay. We'll talk about the people that exposed Russian sabotage and a Russian asset, or at least a dupe left in the White House Oval Office. How dare people find out about that? You're just trying to disrespect the Donald. Damn right. And from what I gather, Flynn could be under criminal indictment, Wink. Not just for taking money, which is a criminal indictment in and of itself. We're not talking emoluments clause here. You know, I'm hearing something a little bit more severe than the Espionage Act, which is a bit weird because now I'm not really into the Mad Dog Mattis way of warfare, right?
Right.
I'm not into the Flynn thing. You know, I mean, I guess it's necessary. I suppose if I was put in a similar predicament, I would put my intellectual prowess to bear and try to figure out how to do stuff. And you got to make decisions about killing people, I guess. I've always avoided being in that position, but I don't know. I've gone hunting. I know the concept. I played football, too. You can do some strategy just knowing some football. Unlike the Donald, can you imagine him being like a military strategist? My God.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I could be a better military strategist, and I don't know diddly except, from what I've read. Sun Tzu, a few others. But from everything that we know about Flynn, highly decorated, focused on the job, did the job well for what it was. And then he went crazy. He may have been a little crazy beforehand. But it might have been one of those mass confluences of, a lot of people in the military think they are literally on a crusade to save civilization. you know. Couple that with InfoWars and all of those groups. All right. This next article is by Stephen Rosenfeld out of Alternet. The federal courts, which so far have been the only institution blocking Donald Trump's decrees, are poised to further impede his orders to ramp up immigration enforcement and create a mass deportation machine. That's because, despite Trump's harsh words for sanctuary cities and his threats to withhold their federal funding, sheriffs across the nation who operate 85% of local jails do not have clear legal authority to detain people who lack visas. Moreover, several class action lawsuits are underway in federal and state courts where rulings have found ICE arrest and detention practices to be illegal, unconstitutional, and leaving local governments liable for damages. So sheriffs actually are not very happy about this. And the deputizing of local law enforcement is not enough to keep them from being sued for violating the Constitution. Or monetary damages arising because of, violating of statutes, too. They cannot deputize local law enforcement to do their dirty work. That's exactly what these lawsuits are about. Mark Fleming, National Immigrant Justice Center litigation coordinator, said, referring to the preliminary rulings in class action suits against ICE in Chicago and Los Angeles and a pending suit in Massachusetts. What ICE, are doing now is unlawful and unconstitutional. That's precisely the wedge that these lawsuits are intending to create. If you're talking about this area of detainers, ICE ordering sheriffs to hold migrants and warrantless arrest by customs enforcement and other DH officers, yes, they will try to push their policies, even though they have lost quite clearly in a number of federal courts and a number of local courts. And I really don't think they will be opening a can of worms by going down this path where they feel they can operate with impunity and disregard the law. Well, that might be a naive way of looking at it, because I actually think that in situations like this, local law enforcement will say, hey, the big guy said it. It's got to be true. Let's go. And they do. But we know how municipalities work as well, right? And I don't think local municipalities want to incur the costs of lawsuits that are already in place and are going to come in droves.
Exactly.
When they start picking up U.S. citizens who actually were born here. But they just don't have the right U. All right. Let's get to our Jim Hightower break, and then we'll connect with our call with Kris, and then go over the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Codes community calendar. You're listening to the After Show on Netroots Radio with Wink and Justice, and we will be right back.
By gollies, the Donald delivers. Trump and his new blue ribbon panel of working-class champions have announced a bold initiative to create millions of American jobs. A spokesman for the panel, Steve Schwarzman, praised Trump as a leader who wants to, quote, do things a lot better in our country for all Americans. Wait a minute, Steve Schwarzman? Isn't he a billionaire hedge fund huckster on Wall Street? Yes, and holy money bags, there's Jamie Dimon, head of scandal-ridden J.P. Morgan Chase. Working-class champions? Trump's whole jobs panel is made up of Wall Street banksters and corporate powers like Walmart that are notorious for laying off and ripping off workers. Trump, the candidate, fulminated against such moneyed elites, calling them, quote, responsible for the economic decisions that have robbed our working class. But now, in a spectacular flip-flop, he's brought these robbers directly inside his presidency, asking them to be architects of his economic strategy. Worse, he's doing this in the name of helping workers. Hello, to develop policies beneficial to working stiffs, bring in some working stiffs. But not a single labor advocate is on his policy council, in his cabinet, or anywhere near his White House. Thus, the so-called job creation plan announced by Trump and his corporate cohorts doesn't create any jobs, but calls instead for, ta-da, deregulating Wall Street. These flim-flammers actually want us rubes to believe that freeing banksters to return to casino-style speculation and consumer scams will give them more money that they can invest in American jobs. This is Jim Hightower saying, do they think we have sucker wrappers around our heads? Trump's scheme will let banks make a killing, but does not require them to invest in jobs, so they won't. There's a name for this, fraud.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Okay, we're back.
And indeed, we are back. And thank you for sticking with us. This is the After Show with Wink and Justice. Justice here along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the West Coast. Wink is in upstate New York, 21 on the East Coast. Kris Reeves is in the vast plains of the Midwest, and that would be in the vast plains of the Midwest. And our crew are the ethereal creatures who reside in the cloud whose advanced intergalactic technical abilities allow Netroots Radio, and thus by extension the After Show, to span the globe, the solar system, past the Oort cloud, into frozen interstellar space. We are just stardust, aren't we?
Yeah.
And, all right. Okay, today's Connect, Unite, Act Daily Codes community calendar is, facilitated by Eric Lewis. I'm just trying to stifle a sneeze here, so... All right, I'm good. And his question today is the scariest thing about Trump. What is the scariest thing about Trump for you? And I don't know, keeping with the meme of the day, I don't know. How do you scare me? Let me count the ways.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, the scariest thing? I don't know if I can pick one, Wink.
Right. Yeah, where do we start? Yeah.
I will say, 25 days in, I feel like we're 6 years into Nixon's administration.
Pretty much, yeah. Feels like it, yeah.
All right, let's see. North Pennsylvania Cossacks will be meeting up this Saturday, February 18th at 6 p.m. at Latino's Restaurant, 1315 Parade Street in Erie, Pennsylvania. I just love that. All right. Time will be determined, and awesome. Cosmail Gizmo 59 to RSVP for that. And they actually have quite a few RSVPs, even without a particular time. Erie, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
All right. And Colorado Community Cossacks meet up for a caffeinating liberally every fourth Saturday of every month. This month it's February 25th. At the Common Grounds Coffee House, 44th and Vallejo in Denver from 9 a.m. to noonish at the table by the piano. Cosmail left Candid or Colorado Tim to let them know you're attending that. Mark your calendar, Saturday, April 22nd. I have a vague recollection that's Earth Day.
Yeah.
And it's also going to be the March for Science in Los Angeles, and LA Cossacks are going to be taking part in that, which will be occurring 9 a.m. to noon. So Cosmail Susans to connect, and then we'll have a Daily Codes contingent of LA Cossacks marching on Earth Day for the March for Science. I love that. Also, mark your calendars, June 30th through July 2nd. Thinking Fella and Ojibwa are organizing the third Epic Glacier National Park meetup and go to the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Diary to find a link for important planning details, and then get a hold of also Thinking Fellow No Jib. Well, let them know that you're going to go, and they have a dozen people already. So, man, think of the barbecue for that one. That is your Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community calendar for the 14th of February, Valentine's Day. Oh, yes, we love you. And without further ado, we are now in the last half, and it being Tuesday on Valentine's Day, of all things, we get to visit with Kris Reeves. Kris, you get roses?
Morning.
Do you get roses for your betrothed, or you make breakfast?
Well, we kind of have our own ritual. I think we'll probably order in food and do something nice tonight. It's my wedding anniversary is February 13th, so I go straight from our anniversary the day before to Valentine's Day. So,
well, we're celebrating.
We're still figuring it out.
We're celebrating here at Netroots Radio our 6th year anniversary today.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
We started on Valentine's Day as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, took a breath on Valentine's Day. Took us a couple of months to learn how to walk, and then we were running.
Then we grabbed Justice and said, get Justice over here. Holy cow, man.
Okay, so Kris, we missed you last week. You were in a hearing on voting rights, I take it, and are you able to talk about that? Does that have anything to do with Kris Kobach? Does that dovetail into his appearances on media recently, where he was completely eviscerated?
Well, so last week in the Kansas State House, Kris Kobach showed up to defend his. It's hard to call it anything else but voter suppression. Tried to defend his method of voter suppression, and his voter suppression method was to institute what's called dual-track voting. Now, for people who don't know what dual-track voting is, dual-track voting says that if you register via the federal motor voter form, you are not registered to vote for state races. So that's governor, treasurer, secretary of state, state house, state senate, or county and city offices. In fact, in order to register for those things, you would have to go back and re-register with another form that's called a state form that requires proofs of citizenship and extra documents and and all of this.
You are,
so it's you're right. So it's a great way to really confuse voters as to whether or not they're registered. And remember, this is a real concern. Part of it isn't just finding fraud, as Kobach says, because so far he hasn't found any. All he has found is 6 people that he took to court, of which they were elderly Republicans in almost every case that I've checked, who got confused as to, one had voted in a primary here in Kansas and then moved out of state to another location and then voted in that state. And he was like, oh, it's fraud. Well, that person just didn't know. So it's one of those kind of things we can think bad things, but it wasn't some massive intent to defraud the country through one elderly Republican moving from Kansas to Arkansas, or in another case, Kansas to Colorado. That just didn't happen. But Kobach's plan was that. During the hearing, they gave lots of testimony about how many races in Kansas were close. In fact, he made the point that numerous precinct races were decided by one vote or less, or fewer than one person voted, and or just one person voted. And so all these illegal immigrants and all of this could change our election. And I altered my testimony. Stood up. I had written testimony and some documents that I had submitted, but instead I stood up and I said, look, I'm somebody who won a race by one vote. I voted for myself. I was the only person who voted, and so I won. And if there's some conspiracy to overthrow precinct people in these small communities, it's ridiculous. I've never heard of such a thing. Kobach's entire plan isn't based on, protecting the vote. It's based on scaring people away from voting. It's about confusing people as to what the process is. or getting people to believe that if they go and vote and they haven't done the right form, they might be subject to legal penalties. So what happens with that? Well, you start suppressing the vote. You're actively suppressing the vote. And for all of their concerns that, hey, a few of these illegal voters can come in and they could alter election, I could say, yeah, but there are thousands of people who are legal voters who aren't voting because they don't know if they can, or they're confused as to the process. And if they could vote, they could change an election too.
Right.
So don't always make these horrible assumptions about, why people do or don't vote, or if they're legal, or, it's just a way to brandish people and whip up conspiracy theories. That's all it is.
Well, Kobach has also been tasked, seemingly, I can't believe that he's totally rogue on this, because it seems to be somewhat coordinated, his appearances on media recently with the Trump White House on immigration and also the voting issues. And in each of these instances, when he's been asked to provide evidence, it's the typical dodge that we get from a Stephen Miller on down. They aren't able to produce evidence. And in your hearing, did he actually have some evidence, even though it might be misinterpreted?
Well, okay, so this is the evidence that they had. They had evidence that at least 2 people had registered to vote, even though they were not legal to register. But he didn't have any proof that they had actually, voted.
Right.
And that's one where some people fill out the form because maybe they get confused. But if they don't vote, then there is no, that's it.
Right.
It would be a little bit like, you applying for benefits and then realize, oh, crap, I'm not eligible, so I'm not going to take them. Okay, well, you didn't take them, so that's it. That's the end of the story. But in Kobach's world, that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is that the fact that they, these 2 people were able to get through, which, by the way, Kobach pointed out that it took them 10 years to find a handful of people. Well, at that rate, if there is the fraud that he's talking about, it would take a decade to find any of it. And so it's a problem that is being done in such a way, such a super clever way, that none of the people on the ground know it's happening, and they only find out 10 years later, which makes the whole prospect suspicious and ridiculous.
It's dubious to mix political metaphors, but I have no problem here on the after show. In fact, it's our reason d'etre, and that is, it astounds me that a philosophy, a party, an ideology that would allow more mercury to go into a stream is paralyzed. If a one voter drop in the pool is going to poison that whole pool of voters, so we have to suppress all voters from being able to vote because of we found a Republican or 2 that voted for us twice, and I just, well, we know it's obviously a dodge. I mean, it's goes back to Murray's pronouncement that they don't want more people voting. More people vote means that there's more people voting against them.
Right.
So
that's exactly it.
Now, since we're on this subject, you use the term dual tracking. Now, Greg Palast has called it cross-checking. Is there a difference between those two? Because I've looked up my name. I've looked up my name, which I believe is what cross-checking is, and there's some Roy Putnams out in the world, but there are no Roy Justice Putnams, poet, philosopher, king of all the known universe. But since I'm modest, you guys take care of it. If it doesn't come with that, I know that it's somebody trying to scam me. But
exactly.
But apparently, just the Roy Putnam could get me in trouble.
Well, okay, so let me explain the difference. So dual tracking is a procedure done state by state that divides voting for federal office against voting for state office. Cross-check is a multi-state enterprise that checks your name to see if you've been removed from the voter rolls in one state to remove you from the voter rolls in another state. It's basically a system designed to purge people from voting. So the first system, dual track, is designed to prevent you from registering or being able to register. The second system is designed to remove you from the rolls once you are registered. Do you kind of see the difference?
Right.
Okay, so the moment you've got both of them, then you're basically making it hard for people to get in and be able to vote, and then you're also making it very hard to stay. You're making it a little bit harder for people to stay on the rolls. So it's a great 1-2 punch.
Well, see, but in my, I sat at a table on voting day, and what I always heard a complaint from county election officials, because they're the ones tasked with these roles, is that if they were just funded a little bit more, then they could take the next step and see how often as a person voted or not voted, and then they can be stricken from the rolls after that. But no one ever takes the next step. It's just like, oh, well, these two names are voting at the same time, but they don't make any other correlation, right?
Right, correct. Yep.
So
that's exactly
it's a 1, 2, 3 left hook and a cross, upper cross or something, because to defund it also. Well.
No, you've got it exactly. That's the whole thing. Look, the more difficult you can make this, the harder it is to stay an eligible voter, the better it is for people who don't want you to vote. Now,
since we're still on Kobach, and since he came on media recently and floated this crazy idea that came out of InfoWars, and then Stephen Miller specifically mentioning, along with Huckabee's daughter, mentioned another astounding issue. And that was busing in thousands of people from Connecticut into New Hampshire. I mean, and then, of course, when confronted, show me the facts, and we hear, well, this is not the venue for those facts. Obviously, to me, this is like, get the lie out there. People who are predisposed to believe that sort of stuff will believe it. And all the rest of us are left with the Gish Kalop thing of like, give me a break. You almost laugh at it, but I mean, Kobach was eviscerated on TV recently on that very issue of, well, where's your facts? And he was reduced to basically saying, I don't have them. And this is a Kobach. He's pretty tough in those situations.
Yeah. Kobach, look, they live in that new world where facts are not facts.
Okay,
it's really hard to. I mean, it's almost hard to explain how ludicrous the arguments being made are regarding, Kobach's positions, because there's just no factual basis for almost any of his claims. And so, how do you really, at a certain point, how do you argue with that?
Well,
because you find yourself just repeatedly saying that's not true.
Right. Well, once again, I mean, our knee-jerk response is to fight bad facts with facts.
Right.
But that doesn't apparently work in the modern political climate. We have to have a message and a story.
Right.
So the only way to fight this, obviously, is with a story. And but I have to say, a lot of times I sit back and go, wow, the story's writing itself. Anybody with reasonable critical thinking skills would see it. And apparently we don't have enough of that. So.
No, we really, really don't. That is something that is an issue where we do not have enough of that. We don't have enough of, hey, this is the reasonable issue. What we're doing is crazy. Let's knock off the crazy. And frankly, I think even with a story and narrative, the problem is that there are, someone years ago made this analysis talking about religious themes, and they said, some people get so captured by a religious story, whether it's Bible or Quran or whatever, that they never escape it, that it becomes, they can never think critically about that story because it's so captured everything that they have, that anything that in any way seems to conflict with anything said, they just reject it. They won't even consider it, and that's the heart of religious zeal. It's not bad. There are a lot of great people in that, but at the same token, what Republicans have done is they've whipped up that same sort of zeal inside their own party, where what they're saying is absolutely anything that conflicts with absolutely anything we believe is not real. Don't believe it. And that makes it really hard to convey any narrative to them, because you could show facts, you could show instances, you can give examples, proofs, studies, people, stories, and there's such a ingrained idea that, if it conflicts with my view, it is ipso facto rejected. So how do you move beyond that? That's what we're going to have to find out. And a big part of that is we're going to have to talk to them, and some people can be, they can get information, process it, and see things differently. But I think a bigger focus is going to be, how do we get the people who are naturally with us motivated to realize we have to have them vote everywhere. We're no longer at a point where people could sit on their hands and go, oh, well, what happens in D.C. or my state house doesn't impact me. Those days are gone.
Yeah,
since we have a bit of time left, I thought, why don't we dovetail into an issue and personality that actually answers this question about stories. I think that your diary that just posted here less than half an hour ago about Maria Elena Durazo, she has a fantastic story, and you are not one to say things are for sure, but if there is a sure thing, she is it. You want to expound on that?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of course, Maria Elena Durazo is running for vice chair of the Democratic Party in the at-large position. That's one of the ones that people think of as a policy position. So these are some of the leaderships of the policy within the party. And she is an incumbent, which means she has been there for one term already. And for a while, there's a big incentive by people who are, of course, unhappy with the party, new DNC members and those, to say, throw everybody out. Everybody should go. And I wanted to say, well, hold up a little bit. The problem is that we have some people who are in our executive staff who are the example of everything that we should be trying to preserve. And Vice Chair Durazo is the voice of labor in the party. She is representative of the Labor Council, so to speak. She is the vice chair of executive legislative leadership in California. But more than that, she is the candidate who looks at what happens next. And I'm going to kind of explain this a little bit. We get really fixated sometimes in movements on, we have to have on-the-ground organizers, and she's that. But when it comes to a position like vice chair of the party, you have to look a little bit beyond that. You have to also say, okay, not only is this person, can they do that, but can they find the other people who can do that for them? Because it's just one person. They can't be everywhere all the time. We can make a commitment to be as many places as we can, but you've also got to be able to identify the talent that says, hey, these are the people who will be the leadership for tomorrow. And I've been to the forums, numerous of them, and I've met with all the candidates, and I'm always impressed when a candidate comes out and says, hey, look, I can raise money and I can do these kind of things. But what I can really do is I can identify that person who other people aren't thinking about, who's going to lead in a community. And I had said to her a couple of weeks ago, I said, that's your most effective argument. That's an incredible argument. And she has really made that very well. This morning she sent out emails to members highlighting how she had found a girl who was a dishwasher at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas who became, a union organizer, a person who helped lead some of their work on the presidential campaign, a point person for their local campaigns. And that person said, hey, look, I'm where I'm at because somebody came to me, tapped me on the shoulder and said, you need to do this. And that's something that we forget a lot. And I guess coming from having been a manager myself in, companies, I know that that's a skill that's really, really difficult, to be the kind of person that doesn't just do the work, but can say, hey, I found this person here and they can do the work, and they're going to do it well. And they're going to be able to freelance, innovate, find the right solution for their community because they're there. And that's a skill that you just can't underestimate. So as I've spoken to members and talked to people around the country, I keep hearing, we need big change. And I think to myself, okay, I understand that, but you have somebody who's on your committee right now who is creating that change constantly. And without that, you lose that voice that says, hey, here are the leaders, not just today, but here are going to be the leaders 10 years from now. Here's going to be the person 15 years from now who's going to be ready to step up. Here's going to be the person who in 5 or 6 years is going to be really important in this community or that community. And having somebody at the top who continuously reaches down and puts a hand out and says, hey, let me pull you up, that's the part that is, the party can't walk away from that. So as far as sure things in the race, I'm hoping it's a sure thing. I've told her that, she should be, we elect vice chairs who are male, female separately in two different ways because we have to have gender balance. And I said, of the female vice chairs, she should be the first who goes in.
I used a sports metaphor earlier about military strategy, as, football is a military strategy of sense. And so we see these metaphors a lot. And politics sometimes uses a football metaphor. But I always thought that the baseball metaphor was more apt, especially how the right wing has taken it in a sense. And that was making sure you had a strong farm team. So getting a farm team is important, but how do we train a Durazo? How do we train the people to be the scouts, to be able to sense the talent? And it's not just sense. I mean, there's something that can be codified in that, I suppose. So I guess we have our work cut out for us, but it's not just identifying talent. How do we identify those that can identify?
Yeah.
Or is that too much of a meta question? I don't
know. That's the tricky question. And it really is. There are some people who have that skill that they can just do it. And there are other people who can learn to have that skill to identify people. And there are other people who it's never going to be a skill they have. Now, it doesn't make people better or worse. Some of the best people I know in my industry could never identify, talent around them, but you would be, you have to have them because they're so skilled at what they do. Some of the best organizers I know struggle to identify the leaders of tomorrow, but they're incredible at what they do. So to get somebody where their key skill is, hey, I'm the person that can find that next person, that's a tough one. That's a lot of interpersonal skills. It's a whole lot of management skills, and it's a lot of things you just can't learn in a classroom or from a book. Sometimes it's a huge number of factors about all the relationships you've made in your life, the connections you made, some of the things that you learned, on an interpersonal level. And so when you find those things, when you find somebody who can do that, you hold on to them, because if you lose that, it's really hard to replace.
In the seconds we have left, a date for the election, and when we have a full DNC in place is when?
It's February 25th.
That's coming up. Okay, well, we'll talk to you next week. I quick calculation in my head means that we'll visit with you before that election, so we'll certainly speak a little bit more about candidacies, and we'll visit with you next week. Kris, thank you.
Sounds good. All right, thank you.
All right, folks, we got to bug out of here. Of course, Hartman coming up at about 6 after the hour. We'll, after a few interludes and station IDs, we'll be playing La Buena Vida's Trio Limpio in honor of Valentine's Day. Oh, yeah. And Randy Rose, of course, coming up in the afternoon. Democracy Now! Before Randy. Hey, I'm just trying to tell you, there's some great content on NetRiz Radio, and you ought to stay listening 24/7, 365. And why? Well, because who loves you, baby? Okay, Wink, I'll see you on the other side.
All right. We're out.